A very warm welcome to all our viewers. I'm Anjali from Simply Learn, and today you'll be learning what lists in Python are. So we'll start with the basic definition of what a list is. We'll then see how you can create the list. We'll then have accessing of the elements in the list, the various operations that can be done on the list, and then methods and built-in functions specifically for lists. And finally, we'll have a short exercise using some of the concepts that we learned today. So what are lists? A list is a collection of data, and this data could be of any data type. In fact, a list could hold data of different data types. As we can see in our example down here, we have a list named X, and X holds 1, 89, the single letter A, the string hey, another number 0, and the capital letter B. Now, another important factor with lists are its indices. Every element in the list has a position, and this position is called an index. The first position in a list is always 0. So 1 is at index 0, 89 at index 1, A at index 2, and so on. So this means that the position of your last element would be the length of your list minus 1. So now that you know what a list is, let's move on to how you can create a list. So this is my Jupyter notebook, and we'll start by creating the most basic list, which is an integer list. So my list name would be num, and then open square brackets, and within this just put in your numbers separated by commas. So that is my first list. Run this, and there seems to be no error. Let's now print this list out just to see what it looks like. And as you can see, the elements that we inserted in this list are printed, which are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, let's create a list with just single characters. So my list name is letter, and the syntax is exactly the same. You open square brackets, and now that we have letters inside, which are characters, you type these within quotes. Let's print this too. And once again, after the run, you can see the letters that we inserted into our list letter. Next, let's create a list of strings. So I'll name my list stg, open square braces, and again strings should always be written within double or single quotes. And that's my list of strings. I'll print this too. Great, so now we have created a list of only integers, only letters, and only strings. Now, as I mentioned before, lists can contain a combination of different data types. So let's try that out. I'll name my list mix because it's going to be a mix of numbers, strings, two numbers, and then I'll follow this up with a few strings. And let's run it. So that works perfectly fine. Now lists have another format. If you have worked with any other programming language previously, you would have come across the term matrix. So usually in other programming languages, matrix are associated with arrays. So they are basically 2D arrays. In case of Python's, matrix can also be of lists. So you can have a list containing 2 or more lists. So let's do that. I'll name my list mat, as in short for matrix, open square braces, and since the elements of this list are also lists, put these two in square braces. So our first list would be 1, 2, and then comma, because our second list is basically the second element of our list mat. And our second list would be AB. And that's how you create a list containing lists. So our parent list is mat, and this contains 2 lists. The first list is 1, 2, and the second list is A, B. So let's print this out. And there you go. So we also created a list containing lists. So these are the different type of lists you can create. Next, we'll move on to how you can access the elements within this list. So there's no point of creating a list if you cannot access each individual element within the list. Now here, to understand how to access the elements of the list, we'll be using the list mix that we created previously. So before we start, I'll just print out mix so you can have an idea of what is inside. So we have 5 elements within mix. The first 2 are numbers or integers 1, 6, and that's followed up by 3 strings, simply learn, get, certified. We previously saw that every element in the list has an index position. So the simplest way of accessing an individual element in the list is by following the list name with square braces, and within the square braces mention the index number of the particular element. So if I want to access the element get, my index would be 0, 1, 2, 3. So mix of 3. And I'll run this. We got our element get. Now in a similar way, you can also use negative indices to access the elements. So when you put a negative sign, the indices are basically counted from the back of the list. Now if I want to access the same word get, but all I know about this word's position is that it's the second last word in the list. I also do not know the length of the list. In this case, I can just say mix of -2. So 2 as in it's the second last element, and the minus signifies that you count from the end of the list and not from the beginning. So I'll run this and extracted get. Now as you probably would have noticed, in case of indices when counted from the front of the list, it starts with 0. On the other hand, when you count the indices from the end of the list, it starts with -1 and not 0. So now we saw how you can access a single element from the front of the list and from the back of the list. Now what if you want to access a range of elements? Say I want to extract the first 3 elements of the list mix. In that case, I could just type mix, again square braces, and within here I'll put colons followed by 3. So ideally there would be a number on either side of the colon, but in this case we are taking from the beginning of the list. So if the digit before the colon is supposed to be 0, you can just leave it blank and automatically it's interpreted as 0. Also, we know that our third element would be at the index position 2. But here we have written index position 3. This is because our last index position is always excluded. So if you give 2 instead of 3, then the only elements that would be extracted would be the ones at 0th and 1st position. Since we want the element at the second position too, we give the ending index as 3. So let's print this, and we received our first 3 elements of the list mix, which are 1, 6 and the word simply learn. Now what if we want to extract all the elements from a certain position of the list, say our third index position of the list up till the end of the list? In that case, again we have mix square braces, and we have the same colons as we used previously. But now, since we want our starting index to be 3, we enter 3 and the element at the third index would be included. But now we want to extract all elements till the end of the list. So you can just leave the last position blank. When you do this, it's automatically interpreted that you're taking all the elements up till the end of the list. Let's run this. And we received get and certified. Now I want to extract the words simply learn and get from our list mix. In this case, what would be the parameters within our square braces? So simply learn is at the index location 2 and get is at the index location 3. So our starting index would be 2, but as we already mentioned previously, if I put 3 as my ending index, I would not receive the element at the index position 3. Therefore, I'll put my ending index as 4 and run this. And there you go. We received our 2 words simply learn and get. Now here's something slightly more fun. So what if I want to extract every second element of my list? In that case, I put 2 double colons followed by 2. because I want every second element of my list, and run this. So as you see here, 1 has been printed, which is followed by 6 in our list mix, but 6 is skipped, and then we have simply learn. Again, the word get is skipped, and we have certified. Now there's one more thing you can do with list indices. You can print them in the reverse order. So to do that, just 2 colons and -1. Let's print that. And as you can see, your list mix is printed in the reverse order. So now if we go back to line 16, these 2 double colons are basically positions for your indices. So suppose you want the second element from the first index and not the 0th index, you can write 1 here. And if you want every second element from the first index up to say the 5th index, you can put 5 here, but in our case, we do not have a 5th index. So I'll just leave it at this. You can obviously try that out. In fact, we'll be using a variation of this in our exercise later on. So now that we saw how you can access the various elements of the list, let's look at the various operations you can perform on the list. Suppose you want to create a list of 100 zeros. If we go by the traditional methods, we'd literally have to type in 100 zeros separated by commas within the square braces. And this gets very tedious. So a short way of doing this is type in that one element that you want repeated multiple times within your list, and outside the square braces, follow it up with asterisk, digit, and the number of times you want this element to be repeated. So 0 into 100, and let me print this. And as you see, 100 zeros exist within our list Z. Now we can also create a new list concatenating 2 or more lists. So let's create a list concatenating the 2 lists that we previously created, letter and STG. So I'll just print these lists out first. That's our list letter. And that's our list STG. Now we'll create a new list called conc, a short form for concat. And how do you concatenate 2 lists? Well, you just add an addition sign between them. So letter plus STG. And that's all it takes to join 2 lists. Let's print out conc. And there you go. So the first 4 elements in our list conc is from the list letter, and the last 4 elements is from the list STG. Now there's another operation with list called unpacking. So here you basically give a string as an argument to this function list, and that unpacks each element of the string as a separate element in the list. So I'll show you this with an example. If I name my list var and list of within the brackets, I enter the string. I say hey there, and now I'll print var. So as you can see, every letter of this string hey there has become a single element in the list var. Now let's check out another operation on list using the list num that we created previously. So once again, I'll just print num out so we can recall what was within it. We had the 4 numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. Now suppose I want the first element of my list num, which is 1, to be in a variable 1, and I want the rest of the elements to be stored in another list called say others. How do I do this? I can just put 1, which is my first variable, a comma, and then star other equal to num. So what happens here is that the star signifies that every element that has not been put into the previous variable or variables is put into this list other. So let's print out the variable 1 and the list other separately and see what they contain. And as expected, 1 contains the value 1, which is the first element of our list num, and the following elements of our list, which are 2, 3, and 4, are stored in the list other. Let's now look at a few methods specific to list. So for the following few examples, we'll be using the list that we created previously called num. I'll print the list out first. So num has the elements 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now the first method that we'll be using is the append method. And the syntax for that is the list name, which is num dot append, followed by brackets. And within these brackets, you basically insert the element that you want to add to the end of your list. So suppose I want my list to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. All I do is enter 6 here, and that should ideally add 6 to the end of your list num. So now let's print out num. And there you go. So previously our list contained the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and after we executed the num.append method, 6 was added to the end. Now what if we do not want to add a single element to the end of the list, but an entire other list? So in this case, we can use the method extend. The syntax for this is num.extend, and within the brackets, you'll enter the name of the list you want to add to your previous list. So here I want to add the list stg that we created previously to the end of my list num. Now before I execute this command, let me just print out stg so we know what's in there. So within stg I have get certified get ahead. I'll just delete this cell and now I'll run the command. So let's print out num. And as you see, num previously had 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 from here. And then we added get certified get ahead to the end of this list num. Now these kind of additions only take place at the end of the list. What if we want to insert an element somewhere in between the list? For this, we use the method insert. And the syntax is your list name num dot insert, and within brackets, you first enter the position or the index at which you want to enter the new element. So I want to insert the string simply learn just before get. So this is my 5th position. So my first parameter here would be 5, followed by the element I want to enter, which is a string simply learn. So I'll type it within quotes. And let me run that. Let's now see what num looks like. And as you see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. And then we have the new element that we just inserted, simply learn, followed by the elements which were previously in our stg list alone. Now there's another method you might come across regularly, which is the remove method. So this method, as the name suggests, removes an element. It basically removes the first occurrence of that particular element. So the syntax for this is num.remove. And within the brackets, you enter the element that you want to remove. So I'll remove the element simply learn and run. Let's now see what num holds. So as you can see, simply learn has been removed. Now if there were 2 occurrences of simply learn, one here and maybe one after ahead, only this word would be removed and not the one later on, because removes only the first occurrence of that particular word or that particular element. Okay, so now let's create a new list, say var1, and we'll just insert a few letters in here. Now imagine you receive a list like this where there are few elements but in a jumbled order. You want to sort out this list. One simple method, sort, is all you need to do. var.sortof, run it. And now let's print out what var1 holds. So all your elements in var1 are now sorted. Python also provides a few built-in functions that can be used with lists. So we'll have a look at the most basic ones. So before we begin, let's create a list, x, and I'll fill my list with just integers. So that's my list, and we'll use this list throughout all our built-in functions. Now the most basic built-in function and the most commonly used is len. What len does is it tells you the length of your list. So len of x and the length is 6. Our next built-in function that we'll try out is min. Min gives you basically the minimum of all the elements that's present in your list. So min of x and the minimum element in our list is 4. Similarly, we also have max, which gives you the maximum of the elements present in the list, max of x, which is 90. Now we also have a function sum, which basically gives you the sum of all the elements present in your list. So sum of x, and that's 189. Now in Python, we do not have a function which gives you the average, but it's very simple to calculate this. We do so using the sum function. So you find the sum and then you divide that by the length of the list. So sum of x by len of x would give you the average of x. So with that, we covered the basic built-in functions for Python lists. We also covered the methods in lists, a few operations in lists. We saw how we can access the various elements in list. So for our exercise, we need to create a list of numbers from 1 to 10. We'll call this list 1. And then we'll split list 1 into two lists, odd, which contains all the odd elements of the list 1, and even, which contains all the even elements of list 1. So now let's move on to a Jupyter notebook and see how this is done. So let's first create our list 1, which will contain all the elements from 1 to 10. Now you can use the traditional methods and enter all your numbers from 1 to 10 within these square braces separated by commas. Or we look at a simpler way of doing this. Just say list, and to this you pass the function range, and within range you specify the range of the elements you want within list 1. So I want all the elements from 1 up to 10. So my ending index would be 11 and they're separated by commas. Let's run this and let's print list 1. And there you go. So all your digits from 1 to 10 is stored within list 1. Now the next thing we need to do is, as I mentioned earlier, we need to split list 1 into odd and even. An odd list will contain all the odd elements and even will contain all the even elements. So let's start with odd. So my list name is odd and the elements will be taken from list 1. And now the tricky part, how do we specify the indices in this case? So if you remember previously, we had gone through an example where we want to access every second element, in which case our index was mentioned like this, where the 2 indicated that every second element would be taken from the list. So in this case too, since odd numbers occur after every second element, our interval is still 2, and we'll start from the 0th position of the list, which is 1, and go up till the end. So this is our command. Let's see what odd holds. And as you can see, odd has all the odd numbers from list 1. Now we need to store all the even numbers from list 1 into this list even. Again, our interval would be 2, but this time if we just skip every second element from the beginning, even would have all the odd numbers. So what we do is we'll start skipping the second element from our second element. So from index 1 onwards, we'll start skipping every second element. Let's print out even. And there you go. So our list even has the even numbers 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. So with that, we successfully completed our exercise and we also come to an end to lists in Python. If you have any doubts, please post them in the comment section below and we'll definitely get back to you. Please hit the like button if you like the video. Also subscribe to our channel as we have a lot more coming up. This is Anjali signing off. See you all next time.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.